Here we go. This community call is a place where anyone can join and listen in to learn or to contribute ideas about the Centrifuge protocol. So everyone's welcome. Your 2-year-old, your great aunt, your hedge fund manager, even that person that you partied with 10 years ago at a university pub crawl, they're all welcome here. Also, all of our DAO contributors, welcome. And if you contribute by participating in governance, by helping out on Discord with answers to questions, by asking the questions, or whether you're originating assets, recommending new asset classes, all of it is so important. Even if you're just lurking and learning, that's important too. And if there's a way that you feel like you can contribute, but you're not sure how to do it exactly, please reach out to me on Discord. My username is Kate B. So it's been a fairly crazy, and depending on your outlook, a somewhat depressing time in the market recently. But we remain confident that we are taking the many small steps needed to change the world of finance and open up access to borrowing and lending on-chain for everyone. The Centrifuge protocol has been built around the ability to tokenize collateral that exists in the real world, i.e. not crypto. And we use this real world stuff for on-chain credit. This is part of why RWAs are the coolest thing in DeFi right now. And in the call tonight, we'll talk more about why this is with Cassidy and with Colin. But really happy to be starting the call by talking with one of our most present and active Centrifuge DAO members and OGs, I would say, and that is Sam from Bloccelerate VC. We'll hear from his special vantage point of being the COO of a crypto forward fund and his thoughts on Centrifuge, why it is so exciting, as well as some reflections for how we can grow as a protocol and as a DAO. So let's jump into it. Sam, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself, Bloccelerate, and what you've learned on your journey.
Sure. Is the audio coming through okay?
Yes, I think so.
All right.
Good.
Hello, everyone. Sam here, reporting in from beautiful Seattle today. So maybe I'll kick it off with a bit of an intro on me. I woke up to the potential of transparency and auditability that blockchains could provide with Bitcoin in 2013. I was an AI entrepreneur fresh out of grad school at that point. Had finished my master's in self-assembling materials, material science and engineering at Johns Hopkins University. Was also thinking social sciences quite a bit. I had studied psych and anthro and environmental sciences in my undergrad. So seeing that, hey, there are these interesting patterns we can build on macro self-assembling materials by how we impregnate the building blocks, and can we do the same by empowering individuals with technology so that they are given the tools to self-assemble into larger systems. And Bitcoin, the growth of the mining ecosystem, the ability to pull down a open source code that enabled you to be a service provider in a very large network, woke me up to the potential, hey, this is actually a decentralized application. It does the value of, store of value as a service, but there's many more applications we could be building in this image. So in 2014, I co-authored a paper called Emerging Wave of Decentralized Applications with a few other folks and published it on GitHub. We then formed a fund around it called Decentralized Applications Funds, the first of its kind crypto fund that raised all its capital in crypto, reported some 360% ROI in BTC terms on invested capital, and the fund distributed all its assets in 2017. In 2018 and circa 2017, I was seeing that the expectations were outpacing real development, so I took a bit of a time off from being an active investor in blockchain. studied more economics and finance, served as a venture partner in another venture fund. And in 2018, I was introduced to my current co-founder at Bloccelerate through J.R. Willett, the inventor of the ICO, which didn't have the name ICO at that time. We were calling it by a more innocent name, crowd sale, where the vision was, hey, let's be jurisdiction agnostic, enable anyone and everyone to easily participate in the delivery of a service, and speak the same language of its native currency, so that the demand for the token will be reflecting the value of the protocol and its services. And when I saw things were taking a more gritty color, calling it ICO, a bunch of unregistered securities happening, I was sort of disillusioned a bit. So that was the impetus for taking a step back. But the merit of decentralized applications, the merit of enabling and empowering all of us to contribute more freely, find where we can add value more easily, and without an onboarding, without legalese, begin to deliver a service over the wire in a trusted, in consensus manner is still there. So that's a bit about me and my vision. And in the very early part of it, we were talking about how people who suffer from, their own jurisdictions are more open to seeing value of blockchain. So just to harp on that as well, I'm Turkish, known to be a set for life because we have a president for life, and corruption up to wazoo. We have had the pleasure of fighting inflation very intelligently by removing 6 zeros when I was growing up. We are the most efficient country that can count 80 million people's votes in 4 or 5 hours, and so forth. So clearly, there was lack of transparency and auditability that blockchain stands for that I find naturally appealing. So that's a bit about me. In terms of Bloccelerate, we invest in existential pain points we anticipate in Web3 and its development. In particular, to us, that looks like what are the tools that DAOs will need? What are the services that Fortune 500 companies, incumbents, will need to on-chainify their operations? Can we find and invest in them and support those projects and entrepreneurs in building these category-defining initiatives? And so that's a bit about Bloccelerate. What else would you like to cover next, Kate?
Yeah, I think it's a good intro. I would love to hear a bit more about your vision of the future regarding things coming on chain. And with that in mind, where does Centrifuge sit in that vision of the future, and why is it exciting for you?
Yeah, so I think we haven't really found any other way to remain in consensus on what the rules and agreements are supposed to be and ensuring compliance to them than blockchain. So I see a future where most anything is happening on chain if it's a multi-stakeholder process or an asset. So when you even think about something as simple as institution of ownership, and institution sounds like a fancy word, but in my mind, we have declared what it is, and we've instituted that in our minds, and we all agree now what ownership means. But when you really look into it, it's actually just a series of rules that we have agreed to uphold. So when you own a sweater or a banana or a house, it's not like the thingness of it, what will clothe you, feed you, or warm you, is not the asset. It's not that you are the owner, but the rules allow you to eat it, wear it, sleep in it in peace with other members of your species, allowing you to do that. So there's this difference between the thing and the asset. And the institution of ownership itself can very easily translate to blockchain, because we declare something, and we then say we're going to live by these rules. We're going to uphold that declaration to be what governs our affairs with other members in society. And declared assets, declared institutions are easiest to put on chain. Maybe before we go into things that were other ledger assets, like the house where there's county records, or or there are country records that are very easily corruptible, because you know somebody's cousin in the deeds office. Before we get there, there are some more of these financial assets that we already have very well defined rules around, and then we can declare them on chain and uphold the rules around them. So as we go towards that eventual future of everything is on chain, it made sense to start with declared value assets that are well defined, have rules that are not requiring as much physical world interventions to enforce. So in that perspective, Centrifuge and loans, financial assets, DeFi at large was a natural place for growth. So DeFi didn't grow because, it's what the world needed the most. It grew most first because it was the easiest for blockchain to actually service, because of the nature of generally declared value assets. So in that sense, Centrifuge was not only in line with the way we see the future, but also was in line with what we think will be growing first.
And so how did that, yeah, that's super helpful. Giving this background on your philosophy and how it led you down this path. And how did you find Centrifuge as you learnt all these things?
Yeah. Yes. How do you meet? What's the first point? It's hard to point at, but when it was like the first time we encountered the name, but really we at Bloccelerate look to do quarterly research reports, find a focus area that we care about, research players, and Centrifuge came up in that context for the most part, as worth looking into, worth supporting, worth investing in. And we had the opportunity to meet with some of the DAO members early on, and structure an ability to make an investment sizable enough for a fund easily.
And just to be blunt, like,
yeah.
Are you excited about Centrifuge, and why?
I am excited about Centrifuge. Well, obviously the vision fit that this is the direction that the world is going to have to move. Why should we need to worry about hard to deal with rails, and why shouldn't we enable most anyone to lend and borrow? Why shouldn't we enable most anyone to deliver financial services, as long as they have a stake and they can demonstrate the expertise and we can verify they're good actors for the health of the ecosystem? We should be able to reduce the barriers and walls into world of finance, and not just value as a store of value as a service or remittance as a service, but actual banking beyond those pure rails that, like a Bitcoin or Ethereum, a native assets may be providing.
Very cool. So as an active DAO member, someone who's thinking about not just Centrifuge, and not just real world assets, but DeFi in general, From your vantage point as a VC, what ideas do you have about how we can grow the protocol?
Yeah. So we want to maintain all the good, enhance all the good. We want to see all the challenges, address them, right? So all these kind of need to be true. The benefits are there. We need to enhance our access to the benefits, right? Transparency, auditability, immutability, ease of verification, ease of contribution are theoretically there. But the challenges kind of limit our access to those theoretical benefits, right? When we go to the forum, it's hard to know where we need to start. When we need to vote, it's hard to know how specifically to do it. When we want to delegate, it's hard to know how specifically we'll do that. And this kind of leads to a self-selection of the most incentivized or the most sophisticated to be able to participate, and the long tail of voices that can actually offer a lot of insight and intelligence kind of get blurred out. So in order to unearth the benefits in full, we'll need to probably do a little better in the tools we use in communication and governance, making multiple voices heard, making it easy to have any stakeholder understand what are the current assets, what are the current liabilities, what are the kinds of loans out there, what are the means in which I can support the growth, what are the challenges that I can think about and offer intellectual input in the solution of, having a repository where, hey, I can do something for Centrifuge, I'm incentivized to do it, and so I also then need being empowered to do that relatively easily. So I think that's the challenge, and to unearth the true benefits, we want to make it a little easier, because easier is better than better.
Yeah, 100%. And I've heard you say in the past that you consider yourself to be simultaneously a stakeholder and a steward of the Centrifuge DAO, and that you really want to contribute. You want to, yeah, you're not just there like on the sidelines giving advice, but you want to get your hands dirty. So I think that is this really strong message for everyone here. It's like,
absolutely. We have a different kind of shift in the psychological framework that needs to happen. Going back to 1600s, imagine you were living in the world of, no limitation of liability, no company whatsoever. Maybe you loaned money to people, and you were maybe trying to be a merchant. Then came along the idea of the company, and now that was sort of the seismic shift on the means of organization and how we could create value, organize labor, reach coordination on assets. And we're in the cusp of this change of the psychological framework of the DAOs as well. So we can be simultaneously stakeholders, stewards, builders, and it's not like we can say, hey, we need Lucas and Kate and Orhan and Ivan to do this, and we can rely on their efforts, right? That would fundamentally, one, make it a security, and it's not the intent. But two, it's, if you're not interested in part of being the movement, you don't want to just be a passive participant in most cases.
100%. So we had a question in the chat, which is continuing the theme of being blunt. And the question is, how do you think about things like the CFG token price? Does that worry you?
Sure, from a financial perspective, it's not fun to see values drop. The way I see it, DAOs go through and their tokens go through much greater volatility in asset prices because market, in a way, more effectively prices the sentiment and the expected future. So it's hard to assess the true worth of some tokens when it stands for a movement, it stands for governance, it stands for possible future earnings of protocols. That said, it also allows everybody to, hey, to wake up. This is a call to action. We want to be more engaged and support because, hey, I'm incentivized. I'm able to. Let me find ways on how I can be more empowered too. So it's also a market signal that comes in the language that everybody can speak. So, you know, if you're thinking I'd like to help, for example, by sending an email from the biz dev team to all the institutions I know who could be using Centrifuge, I'd like to do that because then that will drive adoption, that more institutions may be engaging it because I'm recommending. So having a clear alignment of incentive in the value of the token, and it serves as a call to action. That said, there's probably more around that we can do around that as well. It ties back to the earlier question you asked, that being able to measure the impact and the value that any team member or DAO member was able to add is probably helpful, and rewarding them specifically for value add actions is the key. And I think that's one of the other areas that you asked about. What are the challenges? It's making things clearer, making things more actionable, and making things more easy to track and reward.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so thank you for diving in there.
Yeah.
I want to just see if there's anyone wants to add an opinion here, or a question. Like there's a nice challenge I think that's coming from Sam, which is like, what are the ways that we can be, participants in this thing that we own as DAO members? And there's some clear things that you've identified, Sam, like clear call to actions, clear incentives, a way that you can send a nicely constructed email to a bunch of VCs. And I wonder if anyone else has something to add here as we think about how we can grow the protocol in the DAO.
Let's see, I'm going to quickly check in on the community call.
And yeah, there are a bunch of questions in the community call forum post, which I think
invested in a project or startup at the early stage, how does the potential evaluation of the token and the theoretical evaluation of the profit for the VC take place?
So Sam, I think on some of those, it would be more helpful if you could answer in the forum, just because we've slightly turned in a different direction in this call and we only have a couple minutes left. So I'm just holding the floor for any questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That are more on point. Sahad, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I actually love the request with that. Oh, you guys hear me? Sorry, I think, Sam, the request you have for how can you get more involved is like incredibly awesome. So I don't want to let that go wasted. I would love to answer, but I answer almost with another question. One of the challenges we have at Centrifuge, I think, is the complexity of what we're doing is quite high. So getting engagement through like an open community, getting people to understand how they can contribute, getting partners who are even, educated in domain expertise right? Whether they're credit experts, trade finance experts, crypto experts, they don't have the other side of things to be able to get involved, right? So we have this challenge of finding the right partners, creating this narrative, creating this marketing story that I think we're working really hard on today. I'm part of the core contributing team here, along with Kate, and we're actually doing, I think, quite a better job about it. But it's like the existential challenge for us, I think, as we look into the next year. What do you think Bloccelerate can do to help us resolve that problem? How do you help us build our narrative and make it more clear?
How do we help make Centrifuge's narrative more clear, or how do we help make the value add community members could bring more clear?
I think that the latter part, right? I think if you think about what we're doing, I think it's, you know, it's much better understood real world assets, DeFi, what the value proposition there is. But now it's about the specific partners that we really need to be involved with us. How do we get them to the table? And that's really about getting the message through to them.
Yeah, I think this ties to an existing thread in our community thinking of this iterative, progressive decentralization idea, where I see this as, what are the key actions that need to happen? What can we assign as a role definition for those actions to happen? And then once we could see in our mind's eye, hey, if these actions happen by these type of profile of players, then we see a path to success. Then we can put in place those players that will fulfill those roles, and hopefully a redundant, resilient, multiple profiles, but multiple participants that are filling a particular function / profile, and see them tested in those roles and come out to very clear, okay, here was the job description, here was the function description, this was the software to download, this was the algorithm to run, this was the asset to stake, these were the variables to check. Let's see how well you did. And I think that will empower different players to find the specific roles they can most easily engage in. And if they're paired with a particular function / task and a particular kind of reward associated with it, I think that will help everyone see more clearly what are they best equipped to support Centrifuge with.
A great answer. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm for the subject of how do we, in our progressive decentralization, which is not happening all at once, we're doing it like very intentionally. This is definitely a key building block, giving visibility to the shifts or the changes, and also the tasks and jobs and functions that need to happen, and helping people find their way to do that. I think that's very much in our path as we go forward. So I'd love to encourage anyone who cares about this, Demjan, Sam, Many, Assad, and others, let's keep this conversation going because it's really rich. So thank you, Sam, for coming to the call and sharing.
Happy to be here. I'm no different than anyone here as a stakeholder, a voice. Happy to be a part of it.
Wonderful. Cool. Thanks, Sam. And so now in the call, it's a call in two parts. We're going to talk, Cassidy and Colin, about some of the reasons why we're confident. Why we are confident we're changing the financial system, why we're confident that even though, things out there are pretty crazy, that we're on a good path together with you all. I'll pass to you, Cassidy.
Cool. Thanks, Kate. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. All right. Hopefully that looks all right.
Looks good.
Cool. So what I wanted to talk about today is just maybe generally speaking for Centrifuge, but definitely from my perspective personally, how I'm seeing the story of Centrifuge take shape over the last few months. And I think in the midst of everything that's happened in the crypto markets, I tend to get a lot of questions on how things are going, because people sort of expect there to be a negative across the entire crypto space. And although we've seen a lot of drawdowns in DeFi, and I think that's how a lot of this conversation has gone already today, there's so much positive that's come out for Centrifuge from this. So just as a comparison here, I wanted to show you some numbers. Just comparing DeFi's lending TVL versus Centrifuge. And this is just a quote from a tweet from Real World Asset XYZ, that since the start of November, so just the last month, uncollateralized DeFi lending has drawn down over 60%, from 450 million to 177 million, and it's still decreasing. And that's quite a large drawdown, and makes it completely obvious why we get these questions of how are things going, are things going well, and how are you faring at Centrifuge? But in comparison, at Centrifuge, our TVL has remained stable, just about around 80 million, and for an even longer period over the last 180 days. It's showed quite a sustained interest in the protocol, as well as, I think, speaks to the high quality of our assets, and the fact that they actually are real world assets, meaning that they're uncorrelated to this crypto market. So I think it's one thing to say these things, and it's on our website, it's in a lot of the conversations that we have all the time at different events around the world about what Centrifuge is. And I think this is the moment where we're actually able to demonstrate that and show you the data of what's happening with Centrifuge compared to the rest of DeFi lending. So I think it's a really big testament, actually, how great Centrifuge is doing. And of course, that remains to be seen, what happens as the economy at large is also suffering. And so it's something that we are aware of and keep in the back of our mind, that it's not that Centrifuge is completely immune to anything that might happen to the economy, generally speaking. But compared to what's happening in the crypto market specifically, and how we've seen other DeFi protocols handle this situation, Centrifuge really stands out in comparison. And I think it's one thing to say, yeah, our TVL has remained stable, but just again, going back to this 60% drawdown, that's actually quite a feat to remain stable amidst that kind of a situation in DeFi, I would say. And I think a lot of this has now led to real world assets being seen as pretty hot right now, to take Kate's words, I would say. So I think I put this little meme together, which I think demonstrates it quite well, that people are really starting to see the issues with centralized and crypto correlated DeFi lending, and how important real world asset financing is in comparison. And through that, why Centrifuge is actually such an amazing tool to use to actually finance those real world assets. So this is just a paraphrasing of Kevin Miao from Block Tower, that DeFi has been laying this infrastructure this entire time. And yes, it's mostly just been used for crypto native assets so far, but this infrastructure is extremely important. It's this next big step is to then use this technology to bring these efficiencies to the real world by financing real world assets. And that's going to always be a much bigger market than crypto native assets by themselves. And so I think his comment here, and this is actually taking it out of the DeFi Drip episode we did together with Kevin. So if you're interested to hear more of his thoughts, definitely go watch that episode, because I think it details quite well why institutions like Block Tower are so interested in Centrifuge. Speaking through Kevin's point of view, they're really starting to understand that the future of the credit market is on-chain. Centrifuge is building a transparent way and a more efficient way for the credit market to actually, for borrowers and lenders to participate in financing. So I think that's actually starting to become the baseline of the story when we talk to any institution, regardless of whether they're emailing and reaching out to any one of us, or whether we're meeting them at different events or conferences. I think it's something that's really starting to show, not only just in our personal anecdotes, but in a lot of the language that's out there that you can see in this conversation that we had together with Kevin, but also on Twitter, all kinds of different very large institutions from JP Morgan to the more crypto forward block towers of the world are really starting to take this very seriously. And I think, one part of that story are the institutions, but another big part of that story is the crypto market. And I think because of this downturn that's happening, the crypto native market and people who really are crypto natives, I would say, have started to understand that in order to have a mature ecosystem, it needs to expand beyond just crypto lending. This over-collateralized crypto correlated lending isn't actually even helpful to people in the real world. And it actually poses a big risk to the entire ecosystem of crypto. And so I think it's becoming more and more obvious just how important real world assets are in order to actually create a mature ecosystem. So I think just to maybe take that into this next piece, it's a little bit of a busy slide, but let me walk you through it. These are some tweets from our account that actually go through one of the pieces that Block Tower published about why they think Centrifuge is so important. And the problem really is that there's a lot of rent-seeking parties within this process, within the world of credit. And I think what's really, useful to see from an image like this is just how much of this process something like Centrifuge is really able to cut out. So it's Centrifuge today, and I think blockchain technology generally that really reduces all of these different what they call redundant tasks. And so everything that you see here under this dotted line can basically be replaced by Centrifuge. And I think this really, hopefully shows you just how important something like the Centrifuge protocol is to reduce these inefficiencies. And through that, be able to achieve our goal, which is financial opportunity for all. And I think from here, I'll hand it over to Colin to maybe go through that, how we do that a little bit more in detail. I don't know, should I keep sharing these slides or, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that'd be
Colin's
helpful.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks,
Over to
Cassidy.
you, Colin.
Sure. So I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about things that maybe everyone already knows, but perhaps just put a little context around them. And really following on some of the work that Sam did or opened up with just this concept of it being kind of a team effort or a community effort. I think there's a lot happening behind the scenes, both in crypto, DeFi, and the real world asset movement. There's also, I think for the first time, at least in the time that I've been working on the protocol, a lot of stuff starting to happen more publicly that I think is a really powerful story that I think the community has never really had the tools at an individual level to kind of retell the story that perhaps was happening behind the scenes, but a lot of that's coming to light now, and it's really exciting. So I think the story that's pretty exciting is the work that Block Tower and MakerDAO have been doing together. There's a couple of pieces of this that I think is really important. First is that, especially in markets like this, MakerDAO's presence, I think when the bull market was kind of humming a year ago or a little bit before that, MakerDAO was kind of seen as boring right now. But in times like this, there's kind of seen as like the one person that you can go to on chain for capital, especially for real world assets. And I think Block Tower's work with them and some of the success they've had over the past year is finally coming to fruition, kind of cementing MakerDAO as the senior lender of DeFi for real world assets. And Block Tower doing a great job of bringing their brand and their expertise to complement the work that Centrifuge has done with MakerDAO for all those years. The second piece is Block Tower is kind of a crypto committed institution with a credit fund. That kind of expertise and that model is really exciting to try and replicate. So when we think about kind of the partners and the groups that we want to continue to work with and we want to continue to see come to the Centrifuge community and show interest in what we're doing, it's really hard to find groups that have both kind of the crypto cachet and kind of the crypto institutional expertise that you need, and also have the deep credit experience and the deep TradFi experience. And Block Tower has been able to do that. And then third, I think in the model that they've built, you can see kind of a short diagram of it here. There's a real ability here to scale assets and also off-chain institutional capital. And I think anybody that's talked to me in either these group settings or on a one-to-one basis, I've been pretty honest and pretty direct in the importance and the need for the Centrifuge protocol to find partners, to find groups that can help us expand the market and the platform of really institutional capital providers that can come to the Centrifuge protocol and grow the amount of options and grow the types of capital that can fund assets over the long term. And so that's really what's reflected here. And so in the image at right, what you're seeing is Block Tower's credit fund, how they're bringing off-chain institutional capital on-chain through their fund, and then through their work with Maker, preparing to launch 4 Centrifuge pools that will be taking that Maker capital into those 4 pools. So I think we can go to the next slide there, Cassidy. Cool. So then kind of heading into this, I thought about what can we do to talk about like kind of growth of the platform. And I think one thing that we could do is we could try and talk about like all the things that are happening behind the scenes, but I don't think that really makes sense just because of the nature of those conversations can be kind of confidential or sensitive in nature when you're talking to some of the institutions that, I and others may be engaging with throughout the community. So what I just decided to do is kind of point to and kind of aggregate in one place all of the great public information that's out there. So the first thing that I think is important to call out is the POP process launched back in April. I think we've had 10 or 11 different POPs submit, and a lot of those POPs haven't been able to move forward because of the lack of capital in funding those pools or even being able to fund those proposals. But some of the names that are coming through and some of the information that we're seeing and some of the behavior that we're seeing from the 3 that I've referenced there, Purpose, Riverty, and Havenly, I think we're starting to see real public demand for financing real world assets through Centrifuge that I haven't seen before in my time. Second, through groups like RFA, which is a federally regulated bank up in Canada, they've made introductions on the Centrifuge forum. They've already submitted a MIP6 and are engaged with MakerDAO. And then they're also kind of providing a level of commentary, even on MakerDAO's kind of portfolio allocation model that is really pushing, I believe, kind of the narrative forward of real world assets in a way that's bringing in a level of expertise and thoughtfulness and consideration that's elevating the level of discourse across real world assets. And it's happening on the Maker forum, but undoubtedly it'll continue to accrue benefits to the Centrifuge community and the real world asset movement as a whole. The Aave Go facilitator and Centrifuge's ongoing relationship with Aave continues to grow. And I didn't get a chance to get this in, but New Silver has made some nice progress as well recently with MakerDAO through some votes there. So it feels good to share this slide because it's the first time all this information has been so public, and kind of this almost this groundswell, I would say, has really started to kind of centralize itself in one place, either on the Centrifuge forum or on the forums of some of our partners and some of the primary groups that we work with. And so then I think the last slide, Cassidy, is that I think in keeping with the season, I think and resonating or going back to what Sam kicked off the today's community call with is we are all in this together. And I think for me, as we turn in to the end of the year and we kind of reflect back on the wild year that was and the year that we have ahead of us, I think Centrifuge is incredibly well positioned for success. I think thinking about partners that we work with as kind of institutional in nature, strategic, crypto committed, long-term thinkers who really want to be in the space for, for the next 5, 10, 20 years. That's really what we're focused on. And I think for the community and for anyone out there that needs the information that they need, we can continue to host workshops, work together, get more information out there and get the right story crafted. But from what I'm seeing and what I'm sharing today, the momentum is in our favor even in these bear times. And I think the opportunity that we all have in front of us, should we all kind of come together around it, there's an immense opportunity for success in 23. That's my soapbox. I'll step
Very
down.
nice. We're all in this together at the end of 2022. I think that is a very strong message. Thank you, Cassidy and Colin. Any questions or comments from people in the room? Things you want to add on to what has been shared? Now is my favorite time. I'm happy to wait in silence until someone breaks.
Drop those links in the chat, by the way.
Cool, thank you. So some of the links that have been mentioned are in the chat. There is one question that came through on the forum, which is a bit about this directionality towards working with, crypto forward funds and institutional investors. And that is like, do we need to spend time educating people that don't have enough knowledge about crypto DeFi or crypto or DeFi? Is this a good use of time, or should we just be focusing more on, the educated users? What do you think, Colin and Cassidy?
What's the difference between the educated user and the institutional?
I don't think there's a difference. They're in the same box.
Is the educated user, is another way to say that, as someone that's committed to crypto? Yeah, I mean, I think I would prioritize that first, right? I think there's almost like a philosophical commitment to the space, especially in times like this, that needs to be clear. And I think for those that understand credit, I think there's plenty of those actually in TradFi, but I think finding the groups that really are committed philosophically and understand what we're trying to achieve with decentralized finance, that's a much harder learning curve to get up. And so I would probably prioritize crypto commitment over institutional in nature, but maybe others here have other thoughts.
I'll jump in. I actually think that question kind of ties well to the question I asked Sam earlier, and how do we scale this properly, and how do we actually get people to be on the right page? I don't think I can answer differently than what you said, Colin, and that crypto commitment's important, but I think having people like Block Tower play a role that then shows how you can express crypto commitment for institutions that could be there, I think is really, really, really important. It's not necessarily answering your question, Kate, but I think I just sense that connection there. That was pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's Q&A, it's discussion based. I think this relates a bit to what we were, before we pushed play at the start of the call, we were talking a bit about how people who have experienced very centralized or authoritarian regimes have this natural affinity with crypto, or with the underlying technology and what that can do. And I think that this question is actually linked to that, because the second part of that question was that there are a lot of crypto educated people in regions where there is this chance of centralized collapse, and this person was pointing out Latin America. And I wonder, in terms of emerging markets, if any of the strategy could be in that direction, not just on the asset side, but also on the retail user side. Any thoughts there? Assad.
On the part of the lenders, I anticipate a stablecoin denominated returns would be appealing. On the part of the borrowers that heavily depend on, maybe heavily depending on their local currencies that are suffering devaluation, they might be hesitant to actually be borrowers, because would I rather buy my loan at 25%, deflating, corrupt government stablecoin, or get it 8% dollars? Maybe there's a more difficult decision, but on the front of lenders, I anticipate a dollar denominated return for the most part of these, lesser integrity government and rules of law. There will be probably greater demand on the lender side.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks, Sam. I think let's answer this, look at this question by Yaroslav before we close out the call, because it's an interesting one. Will Centrifuge always position itself as more of an infrastructure project for RWAs, or to be implemented in other DeFi protocols, Aave Maker as the example, or are there also plans to attract capital to Centripools directly?
I mean, that's the institutional focus that we've talked about, is that we are attracting capital directly to Centrifuge in a lot of ways by trying to bring in these larger institutional liquidity providers. And I think one thing that makes Maker and Aave so interesting for us is that it can be long-term much cheaper to get capital through this route. And I don't think that that's something that we would plan to do ourselves with Centrifuge. I think that's a huge undertaking to build a stable token. And so I don't think that that's something that we would do directly. And I think it's great that there are teams like Maker and Aave that are focused on specifically that kind of infrastructure. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring capital directly to Centrifuge. And it is something that we're super interested in. And, also through retail users as well. It's just much more difficult to bring in the retail user today, just because of how complex Centrifuge is. And so it's a little bit easier for an institution to, like we've been talking about, fully understand what Centrifuge is and how they can actually participate in it. And so hopefully from there, it can grow.
Thanks, Cassidy. Kevin, there's interest if you wanted to chime in here with any thoughts.
Yeah, no, you're referring to me, I assume. Yeah. I guess I just zooming out more broadly in the space, we're definitely very much excited in bringing more of the institutional partners into this realm. I think that's a really key distinction of how we can get the next step function of change in this space. In terms of getting to that level of institutional adoption, some of the work that we've been pioneering with Centrifuge and Maker through our active proposal is ensuring that we have, just as Centrifuge has like a modular and composable platform, mirroring that with a modular and composable legal framework, so that we can tack on different types of asset categories, different types of partners and arrangements that don't need to be built up from the ground up every single time. That has been we've seen this composability, provide exponential benefit to platforms like Centrifuge, Maker, etc. And I think this community and these types of forums, and just the general ethos of retaining knowledge, being transparent, but also building on top of one another, is what personally has gotten me very excited about being very active in this space. But I also truly believe that it's a key characteristic of how we are going to achieve all that we are set out to achieve. So yeah, very excited to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for commenting. And we are at time for this call. So thanks to everyone who contributed. Thank you, Sam, for joining. That was really interesting to hear about your experience and some of your, the reasons why you're in the space, and also such a big supporter of Centrifuge. Thank you to Cassidy and Colin for sharing about, why Centrifuge in particular and why RWAs are so hot right now. Thanks everyone for coming with your questions in the chat, and for being part of the Centrifuge DAO and the Centrifuge community. And
Thanks.
hope you all join us for the governance call in 2 weeks. It will be Christmas time. We'll make it fun. Thanks everyone.
Can't wait. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kate.
Everybody, thank you.
Bye.
See you, everyone.